alone in the sinister Alaskan wilderness. My grandfather's cursed rules expose hidden terrors. Sarah stepped out into the Alaskan chill, the darkness creeping in like a predator stalking its prey. Her grandfather's last whispers spiraled through her mind. Never wander alone, never trust a neighbor. She shivered, realizing with sickening clarity that she was completely alone in this remote village. The trees towered ominously, their twisted branches clawing at the sky, casting grotesque shadows across the snow. The air simmered with an unsettling energy, a stillness that felt like a glassy surface right before the plunge. The village, once a vibrant place buzzing with laughter and warmth, was now reduced to cold glances and muffled exchanges. Sarah could sense the void the way neighbors turned their backs, locking their doors with unspoken secrets lingering behind them. Children's laughter, once sweet like honey, had transformed into veiled whispers that scattered like leaves at her approach. A chill prickled under her skin as she walked the familiar streets now unfamiliar, cloaked in suspicion and dread. Nightfall arrived unforgivingly, engulfing her in an unsettling gloom. The last flickers of daylight abandoned her, leaving behind a haunting twilight that seeped into her bones. Her grandfather's cabins loomed ahead, their wood-paneled walls creaking like they were warning her of something unspeakable. She recalled his intense gaze, burning with urgency. Stay close to home, Sarah. The woods aren't safe after dark. But her heart urged her forward, yearning to reclaim lost memories and confront the truths buried beneath layers of fear. Determined to uncover what had taken her grandfather, she followed the old logging trail, ignoring the relentless tightening of her stomach. Each step echoed in her ears, sharp against the rustic silence. The wind picked up, howling as if trying to warn her to turn back with every anguished gust. If you see it, it's already seen you. The memory gripped her, twisting like a knife deep into her terror. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. A sudden snap behind her froze her in place. Heart pounding. She twisted to look but found only shadows darting just beyond her peripheral vision. The motions were too fast to comprehend, yet they sent her mind racing to dark places. Panic washed over her like ice water, a cold sensation prickling at the back of her neck. Something was stalking her, aware and waiting. She turned to flee, only to find the familiar trail morphing into a maze of twisted roots and gnarled trees. The temperature plummeted, breaths visible in rapid puffs. As she fought to steady herself, the once comforting forest transformed into a foreboding labyrinth, suffocating and smothering. Whispers danced on the winds, mocking her loneliness and the choices she'd made. She stumbled on the uneven ground, desperately looking for the way back, but the darkness was relentless, woven thick like a spider's web around her. All at once, a piercing scream shattered the night, shattering her senses and holding her hostage in sheer terror. It echoed through the trees, a blood-curdling wail that felt all too familiar, the kind that could only issue from someone who was painfully aware of their own doom. Her breath caught, eyes wide and searching. Time froze as dread swallowed her whole. In that fleeting moment, amid the tortured echoes of the wilderness, she understood survival may demand a sacrifice she didn't know she was willing to make. As shadows advanced toward her, friends turned foes and danger lurked in every whispered secret. Sarah was left questioning one thing. Who could she truly trust when everything she once believed felt like a lie? She spotted a flicker of movement to her right, just beyond the skeletal trees. A figure, hunched and cloaked in darkness, stepped into her line of sight before disappearing again. Panic surged in her chest, the kind that leaves you gasping, as adrenaline kicked in. Just like that, the laughter of the village children echoed again in her mind, twisted into something grotesque and sadistic. This time it was intertwined with the scream, a chilling reminder that something was very wrong here. Every nerve in her body fired warnings as she spun back the way she came. Sarah felt enveloped by the shadows, pressing in closer, squeezing her heart harder. She sprinted, fueled by terror, ignoring the burning in her lungs. Branches clawed at her clothes, dragging her back as if trying to pull her toward the unseen horror that lurked just outside her line of sight. The air felt thick with malice, swirling around her like a living shadow. Sudden laughter pierced her thoughts, a chorus of mocking voices that made her blood run cold. It rippled through the air like smoke, and she could feel its weight pushing against her skin. "Turn back, Sarah," they seemed to chant. Turn back, she stumbled, breathless, legs trembling. Where were the neighbors who used to greet her with smiles? The village had become an unrecognizable place, a surreal nightmare painted in moving shadows and chilling echoes. Each step took her deeper into unknown territory, heart racing past reason as the path twisted further away from home. Just then, another scream pierced through the chilling laughter. The voice rose high, then fell into silence, leaving an echoing void behind. Every muscle in her body tensed, knowing that scream belonged to someone. But fear made her hesitate. What if it was a trap? What if nothing awaited her but a demonic game crafted by those she thought she knew? Churning panic gripped her mind. She could choose to call out, but dread wrapped around her tongue, suffocating the sound before it could escape. She was on the edge of a frightful abyss of doubt and despair. In a fit of desperation, Sarah moved toward the source of the last scream. The shadows visibly throbbed, like a heartbeat thrumming with raw energy. The underbrush parted, revealing a clearing illuminated by a grotesque moonlight. What lay ahead made her stumble back, barely keeping herself upright as naivety and hope slipped through her fingers. In the center, tied to a gnarled tree, was a figure, a man. His face half turned away, obscured by long strands of dark hair matted and dirty. "Help me!" he croaked, voice pained and hoarse. But as he turned, gazing at her with sunken eyes, the truth sank in. His eyes were shrouded with terror, a reflection of her own. He was a stranger yet familiar, an emptiness clawing at her memory. Could he be the last victim of the forest or something much worse? The stakes felt impossibly high. Her grandfather's words flooded her mind. Never trust a neighbor. The ground beneath quaked softly, a warning that whatever force haunted these woods was now aware of them both. Sarah's pulse raced. Wide-eyed, a choice loomed before her. Should she help him? Trust a stranger bound to a tree and risk triggering the wrath of something sinister lurking just beyond the darkness? Before she could resolve her unease, the woods began to close in around them. Shadows thickened, and the laughter grew louder, wrapping around her like an embrace of chaos. A voice, soft but chilling, whispered through the branches. "If you save him, you may not save yourself." Everything froze again as Sarah's heart pounded in her ears. In this foreign realm, she had to navigate the blurred line between survival and self-destruction. If she reached out to help, who or what was she inviting into her world? With the darkness enveloping them and the echo of laughter surrounding her, she had no choice but to decide to move forward or to retreat back into the unknown. Then, a sudden rustle behind her sent a shiver crawling up her spine. She spun around, eyes wide with fear. What was lurking just out of view now? Her instincts screamed at her to flee. The laughter crescendoed, the night thickening as if the woods themselves were alive and watching. And deep within the shadows, something stirred what awaited her when she turned back around. The laughter faded into a sinister hum, but the rustle behind her grew louder, more insistent. Sarah's heart raced, pounding in her ears as she quickly turned back. The man in the tree was staring at her, eyes wide with fear and unwillingness. Something was off about him, something she couldn't place. "Don't look behind you," he hissed, voice trembling as it fought through the tremors of pain. "Please, just help me." A surge of doubt flooded her. Should she trust him? The trees around her seemed to close in, leaves whispering secrets of their own. Sarah felt the edges of panic sharpening. What kind of game was this? Every instinct told her to flee, yet the desperation in the stranger's voice tugged at her. With trembling hands, she stepped closer, scanning the perimeter. The shadows swayed, shifting and writhing like dark tendrils alive with intent. She glanced over her shoulder. No one else was there. Deep breath, Sarah. She chided herself for hesitating. If she left now, who could be next? Can you free me? He implored, the fear in his gaze pulling at something buried deep within her. Before she could reply, the rustling became a guttural growl, low and threatening. It seemed to rise from the very ground, as if the earth itself was displeased with their presence. Sarah's breath hitched. Something unseen was closing in. Sarah, you need to hurry, he urged, suddenly frantic. It's coming. She looked around wildly, caught in a web of growing terror. Was it the laughter she heard or a sound deeper, more primal? Slivers of moonlight bathed her in a cold sheen, illuminating just enough of her surroundings to make things clearer yet more horrifying. Shadows danced not just from the trees but from the very air, animating the forest in menacing spite. Where is it? What is coming? She stammered, even as doubt began to coil around her mind. The man's panic ignited a strange flicker of resolve within her. As she knelt to examine the knots binding him, each pull of the rope against her fingers felt electric, a lifeline dangling between decision and danger. Just as she began to work, the shadows prickled, and a howl split the air, a sound so raw, so terrifying that it crashed through her thoughts like a terrifying wave. Her hands froze, and she looked up. The figure behind her was not human. It was a mass of shadow and fury, eyes blazing like hellfire. Fear gripped Sarah like a vice. Sar, the stranger's voice, was lost in her spiraling panic as she bolted up, adrenaline pushing her to flee. But something made her pause. She had nearly left him behind. The weight of that decision sank in. I can't just leave him. The moment hung heavy in the air, thick with consequences. The creature in the shadows moved closer, and the laughter rose and fell, now echoing with a new madness. In that split second, she plugged her ears to shield herself from the cacophony. Silence, then sudden thunder, as the very ground beneath them erupted, sending a shower of leaves and dirt into the air. Bound by sheer instinct, she made a decision not to run, but to fight off the encroaching darkness. She turned back, lunging at the ropes with a renewed fervor. Stay with me, she cried out, trying to block out the noise, focusing instead on the stranger's grasp, on freeing him before whatever was coming consumed them both. As the last knot slipped from her fingers, a horrible scream tore through the forest. It resonated deep within her, clawing at her insides. The man shot to his feet, terror and desperation mixing on his face. We have to go. But what was hunting them was no longer a mystery. Sarah could feel its malevolence in her bones, wrapping around her like iron chains. As she darted forward, uncertainty gripped her, pulling her back. Something flicked in the corner of her vision, a glimmer of familiarity. Was that a path home? A glimpse of safety? But it felt wrong, too inviting. Which way? She looked back, but the man's face twisted with fear. Was it the right choice to trust him? The shadows lunged, rushing forward with a snarling shriek, a tide of darkness threatening to swallow them whole. In that moment, Sarah had to decide. Trust the stranger and plunge deeper into the chaos, or run for what might be a way out. Then, a growl so close it sent ice racing down her spine echoed through the clearing. What would she choose, to embrace courage or cowardice before the darkness claimed them both? With a jolt, Sarah dashed to where the man stood, heart pounding, breath coming in shallow bursts. The shadows flickered closer, and the ground trembled beneath her feet. She grasped at his arm, forcing her legs to move, dragging him with her as the chilling howl reverberated through the air. Come on, she shouted, her voice barely piercing through the chaos. It felt surreal, as if time stretched on a taut wire about to snap. Wait, he gasped, pain flashing across his face. We can't just run. We need a plan. Plan? Desperation twisted in her gut. What do you mean, a plan? We need to move now. But he shook his head, urgency lining his features. They can't follow us if we go deeper into the forest. You can't let them see you. Something shifted within her, a flicker of that first moment of disbelief crawling back. Them? The moment hung like a miasma around them, thick and festering. A rustling grew louder, echoing around the dense trees. The shadows were playing games with them, promising the worst kind of nightmares, ones that gnawed at the edges of sanity. "Listen to me," he pleaded. "They're after me, but they'll take you too if you don't listen." "How do you know my name?" Panic swelled like a tidal wave. But he was already moving, pulling her further into the dark embrace of the woods. "No time. Just trust me." Farther into the trees they ran, branches scraping against Sarah's skin like angry fingers gripping at her, pulling her deeper into darkness until she couldn't see a thing. Her mind raced. Who was this man? And why should she trust a stranger wrapped in such overwhelming distress? Wherever they were going, there was no turning back now. The laughter morphed into shrieks, high-pitched and horrific, rolling like thunder through the blanketed night. Each sound tightened her chest, a vice-like grip of dread. "Stop," she gasped, pulling back. She clutched her sides, fighting to quell the panic besides the weighted fear unraveling her thoughts. What if it's a trap? It's not. His voice was a frantic whip against the stillness. "If we stick together, we'll have a chance." The world dimmed as they moved deeper, the familiar now uprooted by ominous shadows. But worse than the darkness was the weight of the man's eyes. It was raw, an animal caught in a snare, desperate for escape. "What's after you?" she whispered. "You need to tell me." He paused, glancing around as if the darkness had ears. "It's what made me like this." "Like what?" He leaned in closer, breath bated, the air laced with electric tension. "Not human, not anymore." Her heart raced. A flicker of moonlight caught on his face, the sharp edge of fear clear as glass. Suddenly, the shadows whispered more urgently, a dark chorus rising in shrieks to drown out any hope. She looked around, panic snaking up her spine. "Listen," but before he could finish, the growls crescendoed, surrounding them, and the warmth of the forest plummeted. The very air shifted, wrapping around her throat like a chokehold. All notions of safety vanished. A flicker of movement caught her attention. A pair of glinting eyes emerged out of the tumultuous darkness. They were hungry, watching. The man recoiled, dread overtaking his features. "It's here. We have to move now." "What's your name?" she managed to ask, her voice trembling as the realization washed over her. Time was slipping away, clawing back into the abyss. But before he could answer, shadows surged, thick as smoke and palpable as the terror that gripped her heart. They had little time. Was he right? Would they survive? Or would they fall victim to the horrors lurking in the night? As they turned to escape, an ear-splitting roar shattered the silence, twisting their world into chaos. The chase was on, but who would emerge unscathed? "Run!" he barked, but with every step, the darkness encroached closer. They had to escape. Could they trust each other long enough to live? Or was that the ultimate lie woven into the fabric of the night? And then, from the shadows, a voice whispered, chilling her blood. "Welcome home." The ground quaked beneath their feet as they stumbled forward, hearts racing, adrenaline surging. Sarah's mind spun with fear. What kind of nightmare had she walked into? The trees loomed like sentinels, twisted and malevolent, blocking any light that dared penetrate the night. "Over here," the man shouted, yanking her toward an ancient oak. Its gnarled roots curled around the soil, creating a crevice that felt like an inviting embrace or a snare. Sarah hesitated, instinct screaming at her to flee, but something in his eyes urged her on. They ducked below the low-hanging branches, shadows coiling around them, binding them to an uncertain fate. The sound of footsteps echoed through the underbrush, low and pounding like the heartbeat of something too large to comprehend. Sarah held her breath, wishing for silence. The shadows whispered around them, their words indistinguishable yet impatient, clawing at her mind. "Who are they?" Sarah gasped, her voice barely a thread. The man beside her cast a glance back, eyes wide with torment. "We call them the Hollow Ones," he said, each word heavy with a palpable fear. "They were once like us, but something changed them." Sarah felt the hairs on her neck stand on end. "What changed them? What do you mean?" But just then, The hollow laughter shrieked again, echoing through the trees like nails on a chalkboard. It chilled her more than the icy wind that whistled through the branches. The hairs on her arms prickled. Something was coming. "Stay quiet," he warned, pressing a finger to his lips. They huddled in the crevice, limbs tense, waiting for the presence of that lurking horror to reveal itself. The air grew thick and stale, a mix of decay and dread. A shadow slipped between the trees, elongated and twitching. An eyeshot of glimmering, predatory gaze swept across the area, lingering just long enough to ignite a fire of panic in Sarah's chest. The unmistakable feeling of being watched crept in, prickling the back of her neck. "Are they human?" she asked, her voice a mere whisper. He shuddered, jaw tightening. "They're not entirely human anymore, not in the way we understand it. They've lost themselves, their souls trapped in this place." The laughter grew louder, more mocking, echoing through the dark. Sarah clenched her fists, every ounce of her brain screaming to fight or run. "Then how do we escape?" She faced him, desperation clawing. "You said there was a plan." His gaze shifted to the void beyond the trees. "We have to find the old stone circle. Is south the only place they can't enter? But we must leave immediately. Follow my lead." Before she could respond, a growl thrummed through the air, and a creature lunged into view. It was grotesque, an amalgamation of human and beast, with sunken eyes reflecting madness. The stench of rot filled her lungs. "They're coming," he shouted, dragging her back from the edge. They scrambled from their hiding spot, racing through the maze of trees. The shadows twisted and turned, blooming into dark recesses that felt alive. Branches snapped behind them, followed by the echo of their pursuers, relentless in their hunger. Then, an almost blinding flash erupted, light bursting through a break in the trees. Could they hope for safety? Keep running. He pulled her toward the brightness, but terror gripped Sarah's heart. What if it's a trap? He locked eyes with her, urgency pulsing between them. "If we want to live, we have to trust in something. Anything." The ground trembled beneath them again, a deep, reverberating growl that signaled their hunters. As they dashed forward, the ground caved in beneath them, sending them tumbling into a pit, the world swirling into darkness. "Sarah!" he screamed, reaching for her with a sickening twist. She fell deeper, the roar of the woods above threatening to swallow her whole. The last thing she felt before hitting the ground was the cold grip of darkness enveloping her, luring her into its embrace, and then silence. What horrors awaited them below? Would they separate in the darkness, or did the abyss have something more terrifying planned? Sarah's breath came in ragged gasps as she hit the ground, pain shooting through her limbs. Darkness swathed her like a heavy blanket, and she lay still, trying to gather herself, listening for any signs of life around her. "Are you okay?" came a voice, muffled as if reverberating from a distance. With effort, Sarah turned her head, her vision still blurred. The man was beside her, his outline a dark shape against the faint light seeping through cracks far above. I'm fine," she managed, pushing herself up on her elbows. Pain radiated from her shoulder where she had landed awkwardly, but she forced it aside. "What now?" she whispered, dread coiling in her stomach. "There should be an opening somewhere." His voice was hushed, eyes darting as he scanned the darkness. The air down here was cold and stale, tinged with the scent of damp earth and something else, something rotten. They moved slowly through the blackness, arms extended to feel for walls. Sarah imagined the trees, monstrous shapes looming over her, waiting for the moment they would sink their roots into her soul, just like they had for the hollow ones. "Stay close," he said, voice trembling, as he stepped ahead. With cautious steps, they pressed on, the ground shifting beneath them. Suddenly, Sarah felt her foot dip into something soft, mixture of dirt and an unidentifiable substance that squelched as she moved. She recoiled, suppressing the urge to vomit. "Oh God, what is this?" she breathed, trying to shake off the sensation. "Just sludge," he said. "Just keep moving." But before Sarah could assert her control over her racing thoughts, a low hum resonated through the chamber. crept under her skin, vibrating in her bones. The man froze, the fear palpable between them. "What is that?" Sarah whispered, her heart clenching. He reached for her and gripped her arm, eyes wide. "I don't know. But we need to get out of here." The hum escalated, pulsing like a heartbeat, and the earth beneath them trembled. Shadows began to swirl. Something was rising in the dark, creeping toward them. "Run!" he shouted, yanking her ahead as they dashed down a narrow passageway. They ducked and maneuvered through tight spaces, the walls scraping against them. Cold fingers of dread wrapped around Sarah's heart as that dreadful sound echoed behind them, growing closer. "We're almost," he began, but a blood-curdling shriek pierced the air, cutting him off. "Go!" Sarah screamed, pushing forward, panic spurring her on. Ahead of them, she spotted a faint light flickering in the distance. She could hardly believe it an exit. Hope surged within her, but so did the urgency to escape the approaching terror. As they neared the light, the sound of anguished wails filled the air, resonating with pain and desperation. Sarah glanced over her shoulder. The shadows were no longer merely darkness, they were shifting figures, grotesque and twisted, mere silhouettes of the hollow ones, emerging from every crack and crevice, desperately clawing toward them. The exit loomed closer, a sliver of salvation. But as they rushed forward, a figure burst into the beam of light, a woman with hollow cheeks and an unnatural smile, her eyes sunken in madness. "Sarah!" the man yelled, pulling her back as she gasped. Trapped between the horrifying figures behind and the twisted figure before them, Sarah felt her feet root to the ground. "Go!" she screamed, a voice of defiance. But terror dulled her senses, trapping her in horror. What choice remained? With doom closing in from all sides, they would either break away or be claimed by the darkness forever. The echo of the woman's laughter filled her ears, constructing a wall of fear that seeped into her mind. What would she do next? But just then, a howl pierced the air, a sound far more potent than any human laughter. In that moment, everything fell silent, and Sarah knew something sinister was awakening. What lay beyond that haunting laughter? Would they confront it together, or would the shadows pull them apart? A chilling silence hung in the air after the howl, but it was quickly shattered by the rustling of shadows. Sarah's heart raced, a primal instinct kicking in. She turned, barely glancing at the woman with the hollow cheeks. "Run!" she screamed again, adrenaline igniting her legs. She sprinted toward the faint light, pulling the man along behind her. He hesitated for a second, locked in terror, but then he joined her, fear driving him. The darkness seemed to reach for them, clawing at their heels like icy fingers desperate for a last grasp. As they dashed, the laughter morphed into cries, an orchestra of anguish that surrounded them, echoing off the damp walls. "Just a little further," she gasped, her lungs burning. The flickering light ahead pulsed with a strange intensity, promising something, perhaps safety, perhaps doom. The moment they crossed the threshold into the light, they stumbled into an open chamber. It was vast, filled with jagged rocks and an eerie luminescence that cast everything in an otherworldly glow. The ground shimmered as if it were alive. Sarah glanced down, her stomach dropping. It was a mosaic of bones and shards, remnants of past victims, all plastered together with a slick layer of something dark and viscous. "What is this place?" the man breathed, his voice a shuddering whisper. "I don't know, keep moving," Sarah urged, urgency lacing her every word. But the light that had felt like salvation began to dim, pulsing with a heartbeat, eerily synchronizing with her racing pulse. A sudden crash echoed from behind them, making Sarah spin around. The shadows had breached the light's barrier, undulating like a swarm of nightmarish shapes, twisting, warping into grotesque forms. The figure of the hollow-cheeked woman emerged first, her grin stretching impossibly wide as she glided toward them. "Join us," she cooed, her voice a sickly sweet melody dripping with malice. "No!" Sarah shouted, the sound tearing from her throat. She backed away, bumping into rock, a natural barricade that provided a momentary reprieve. The man clutched her shoulder, shaking. "We can't hold them off like this," "They're not real," Sarah whispered, trying to convince herself even as she stared into the abyss of madness. "They can't be." Just then, the laughing intensified, reverberating through the chamber until it grew sharp, slicing through the air. The shadows stretched longer, reaching even closer. Suddenly, Sarah felt something tug at her leg, pulling her down, the sludge beneath oozing around her like a sinister serpent. "Help!" she screamed, panic bursting from her. The man lunged, grabbing her arm, trying to pull her back. "I've got you. Hold on." He strained against whatever was dragging her, muscles tightening as the shadows writhed around them. But the tide of darkness grew, swallowing him in an instant. Sarah gazed, horrified, as he was yanked into the black. "No!" Terror wrapped around her as she scrambled to her feet, heart pounding like a drum, echoing through the chamber like the grim reminder of what awaited them. Where had he gone? What had taken him? She had to find a way out. Trust her instincts. Remember what she knew. Deep breaths. Focus. Just as she turned to flee, the mocking laughter transformed into a chorus of whispers, all overlapping, forming a web of secrets and lost promises. Each word pulled her closer to the edge of madness, tempting her to listen to their truth. "Sarah, come join us." The chilling sound tightened around her mind like a vice. She stumbled forward, caught in the pull of those haunting voices, teetering on the brink of surrender. But then she remembered the man, their brief connection that the darkness hadn't severed. Amidst the chaos, there was a flicker of resolve. She wasn't done. She wouldn't let the shadows take her. Drawing from that flicker, she tore her gaze from the shifting figures, scanning the jagged walls for an escape route, something, anything. What lay hidden in the dark corners of the chamber? Would it lead her to freedom or deeper into despair? She could feel time slipping. Just then, through the swirling terror, she noticed a faint outline, a tunnel glistening at the far end of the chamber. Hope surged, blurring the shadows momentarily. "Get out! Get out now!" she urged herself, fists clenching as she charged toward the tunnel's mouth, willing her legs to move faster. But as she reached the threshold, the darkness rippled behind her, and the laughter crescendoed, drowning her heartbeat. Would she escape, or was she simply leading herself into another trap, ensnared by the darkness that hungered for her? The shadows whispered her name with a seductive pull. The tunnel loomed before Sarah, an inviting yet foreboding maw in the jagged wall of bones. She pushed herself forward, heart thundering louder than the swirling chaos behind her. Each step echoed against the cold stone, muffled whispers clawing at her ears. The seductive pull of the shadows behind her was intoxicating, gnawing at her resolve. She gasped as she crossed the threshold, slipping slightly on the slick floor inside the tunnel. The space quickly narrowed, walls closing in like a trap. Gritting her teeth, she pressed on, arms brushing against the damp rock, sending cold shivers up her spine. "Keep it together," she murmured, though her voice shook. The whispers grew fainter behind her, but they left a residue of fear that wrapped around her mind like a shroud. A flicker of light teased at the far end of the tunnel, just out of reach, pushing her onward. But darkness coiled around her, every shadow a reminder of what she had fled. Images of the hollow-cheeked woman and the agonizing screams flooded her mind, an endless loop of terror. With each step, a sense of urgency mounted, every instinct screaming at her to hurry. Something was coming. She could feel it, creeping through the confines of the tunnel like a predator stalking its prey. Just as she reached the end of the tunnel, a loud crack echoed in the darkness behind her. The sound was sickeningly familiar, the same noise she'd heard when the shadows first breached the light in the chamber. It jolted her into action. Bursting into an open space, she staggered to a stop. Before her lay another chamber, smaller but eerily beautiful, a phantom light casting ethereal shapes across the smooth surfaces. But it wasn't the walls that held her attention. It was the figure huddled in the corner. "Help me," it rasped, voice thin and broken, resonating like a painful whisper. As Sarah approached, her heart sank. The figure was unmistakably human, an older man, eyes wide, tracing her movements with desperation. "Who are you?" she asked cautiously, scanning the space for threats. I was part of their collection, he stammered, shaking like a leaf in the wind. I can't stay here. You have to help me. They will come for you next. Panic clawed at her throat as she stepped back. What do you mean? Who are they? Those that draw you in the shadows. It feasts on fear and despair. His gaze flitted over her shoulder, panic etched into every line of his face. You have to go now. Chilled, Sarah pulled back, instinctively glancing behind her. The entrance stood unchanged, but she felt a shift in the air, something ominous just waiting. Wait, she cried. What's your name? James, he gasped. If you leave me, it won't stop. It'll find you. Can smell fear, you need to feel no fear. A flash lit the room, illuminating his uneven, gaunt face, revealing a glimpse of madness lurking in his eyes. The shadows seeped around the edges, curling closer, cold and alive. Was this what happened to those trapped in this realm, torn apart by terror until they became part of its fabric? Sick with dread, Sarah felt the weight of choice tightening around her chest. She could help him or she could keep running. Leave me, he shouted suddenly, voice breaking, urging her as the shadows thickened. It's coming. As the atmosphere thickened with dread, Sarah took a shaky step backward. The embracing darkness loomed around them, reaching for both, ready to drag them into its grotesque waltz. A choice lingered, sharp and cruel. Run into the unknown, or stay and face the horrors of the torturous fate James warned her about. A guttural echo filled the space, growing nearer, and Sarah's skin prickled as the laughter swelled again, punctured by jagged cries. Choose. And with that, she felt the familiar tendrils of fear wrap around her heart, squeezing tighter. Would she flee or find a way to confront the darkness that had already claimed so many? As the shadows crept closer, drenching the chamber in a chilling embrace, Sarah realized her time was running out. Sarah's breath quickened. The temperature in the chamber dropped further, wrapping around her like icy fingers. James' eyes flared with feverish urgency, and she could feel the weight of every second ticking away as an unseen force drew closer from the mouth of the tunnel. Run, he pleaded, desperation making his voice gravelly. In that moment, fractured thoughts swirled in her mind. Run, but without knowing what hunted her, without knowing what awaited her at the end of the tunnel. The shadows behind her pulsed like a living thing, a living predator with jagged teeth that hungered for despair. But then there was James, trapped like a fly in a web of madness. Was she really leaving someone behind to face that darkness alone? He was pleading for help, yet it tore at her soul, that same whisper inside her saying she might very well be the next victim. Please, do something. If you leave now, it will claim you both. He croaked, the shadows curling tighter around him. Each syllable felt like a knife in her gut. It was the moment of truth. She could feel the shadows reaching, clawing gently at her ankles as they whispered promises of safety, of freedom from fear. But the memories of the hollow-cheeked woman screamed in her mind, wrapped tight around her heart. She could not succumb to darkness. Okay, Sarah shouted, spinning back toward James. I'll help you. He blinked, surprise flaring in desperation. No, you don't understand. Staying here only strengthens it. He staggered to his feet, his wild gaze pleading. You have to believe me. Then what do we do? Her heart raced wildly, adrenaline surging as she thought of the darkness behind her. The light, it shatters the shadows. He gasped, pointing toward a flickering glow emanating from one corner of the chamber. But we need to reach it together. She struggled to maintain focus as panic surged through her veins. The laughter, that cursed laughter, echoed from the tunnel where the darkness writhed. The air thickened with dread, almost alive, as if it knew they were stalling. Let us go, she yelled as she lunged toward the light, calling to him as she ran, her legs pumping hard to outpace the darkness. James followed, his breath ragged and desperate. The shadows hissed and pulsed at their heels. Sarah could almost feel them reaching, trailing cold fingertips grazing her back, tempting her to slip, to stumble and fall. Faster, James urged, his voice a wild timbre mingling with the shadows' murmurs. Don't look back. The glow grew brighter, pulsating in time with her frantic heart. They rushed toward the source, a small orb of purity in an ocean of black. As they stumbled toward it, shadows crashed against her, ferocious and swirling. A cold knot gripped her stomach, panic screaming for her to give in. Almost there, James shouted, his voice mixing with the cacophony of screams and laughter. Just as Sarah reached for the light, it flickered violently before her eyes. Shadows coiled around her wrists like shackles, tugging her backward, pulling her apart from the radiant glow. "Sarah!" James cried out, his hand grasping at hers. The shadows seemed to throb as if they had come alive, pulling him into their suffocating embrace. "No!" she screamed, the terror rising up in her throat. She felt the flicker of hope slip between her fingers like sand. The brightness was beckoning, but could she leave him now? "Sarah, take it," he yelled, desperation filling every word. "Don't be afraid." The shadows howled in anguish, pulling with a strength that felt insatiable. Uncertain, Sarah hesitated as the light began to fade, and the shadows lunged, ready to swallow them whole in that moment, to save herself or save him. The weight of the decision pressed down, squeezing the breath from her lungs. A blinding flash ignited the chamber, momentarily halting the shadows. There was no choice. "Hold on," she shouted, heart flickering like the dying light. Could they resist together, or would they both fall into the abyss? As the chaos erupted around them, reverberating laughter echoed in the darkness beyond, and Sarah realized something terrifying. Perhaps nobody could truly escape. What would she choose when the light dimmed and the darkness returned? The world shook as Sarah felt the weight of the shadows cling tighter, their icy grip clawing at her resolve. With every fiber of her being, she knew she couldn't let the darkness drag James into its depths. Time felt suspended, a horrifying limbo where choices loomed like jagged cliffs, daring her to fall. "Sarah." James's voice cut through the chaos, frantic and unwavering. "You have to trust the light." The flickering glow pulsed with an urgency that mirrored her own racing heart. It felt like a lifeline, shining with genuine warmth amid the encroaching nightmare. She looked into James's haunted eyes, and something clicked. They were linked by fear but also by an ember of hope. "Together," she yelled, clenching his hand tightly as the shadows howled, raw and thunderous. In that moment of clarity, she felt the chains of despair around her heart fracture. "Now," she commanded, and with fierce determination, they surged toward the orb of light. Shadows screamed, slashing at their heels like animals denied their prey. It felt surreal every step lighter as she surged closer to the light. It kissed her skin like warm sunbeams. She felt cracks forming in the choking darkness that had bound her. Each footfall became a rhythm of defiance, an echo of resistance. James mirrored her pace, fueled by the same fierce desire to break free. "Just a little further, Sarah," he shouted, breathless determination etched in every syllable. The shadows writhed, monstrous forms twisting and contorting as if coming alive, desperately trying to reclaim what they had lost. But through the maelstrom of terror, Sarah focused solely on the light, a beacon of salvation pulling them upward. With an ear-splitting roar, the shadows lunged, reaching for her with elongated arms of despair. She could feel the bitter cold wash over her, an unnerving embrace. "Hold on," she repeated, her heart pounding a desperate tattoo. The orb blazed brightly, sending a wave of energy surging through them. With every ounce of her spirit, Sarah surged past the narrowing grip of darkness and thrust her arms toward the light. It blossomed, engulfing them both in an incandescent glow of force that peeled back the shadows like old paint. And then, with a rush that felt like breaking through a thick, stifling curtain, they were free. Gasping, Sarah tumbled onto solid ground. The darkness shattered behind them with a final, agonizing cry, dissolving into wisps of nothingness as the laughter subsided into a hushed whisper. It was over. They were safe, but at what cost? James rolled beside her, the remnants of fear mingling with relief etched onto his weary face. "We made it," he breathed, disbelief dancing in his eyes. But the sense of safety felt precarious, as though standing at the precipice of a cliff. Sarah pulled herself up, looking around. They were in a sprawling meadow, bathed in pale moonlight, flowers swaying gently as if whispering secrets of survival. Yet, a seed of dread remained. The shadows would never truly fade away. They were part of the land, now the nightmares twisting through the roots of trees, lingering in hushed silence. Will they come back? James asked, voice shaky. Can we truly escape? She held his gaze, remembering her grandfather's warnings, the chilling whispers of distrust filling her ears. But she refused to waver. We faced them, she answered, the conviction surging within her. And we prevailed. Gradually, the swelling shadows faded from her chest, and as the stars sparkled above, the weight lightened. They would carry scars, both emotional and physical, but they had chosen strength over fear. Together, let us go home, Sarah replied, offering a small smile that lit up her weary face. A reminder of hope, resilience, the kind of light that could withstand any darkness. Hand in hand, they walked away from the lingering gloom, forging a path into the unknown. Felt different now, brighter and more alive, filled with possibilities. Perhaps the world wasn't just shadow and terror, it was beautifully woven with laughter, memories, and unbreakable bonds. As they stepped into the dawn of a new day, Sarah took a deep breath, setting her heart on the future. She would always remember the darkness, but she wouldn't let it define her. It was time to embrace what lay ahead. And there would be plenty to tell. Before you go, listen up. You need to subscribe now, so you don't miss out on our next exclusive stories that will give you chills. Smash the like button now to help us feed the algorithm. Show your support, and keep the magic alive. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this wild conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this electrifying finale. Your loyalty matters because only true fans know the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.